Hello, as you can see today I'm going to be talking about the game The Mandalorian Adventures. This just came out recently. I had pre-ordered it and came in the mail this week. I've managed to play the first mission, so that's what I'll be going over. And the rules, basically, the rule book goes over the rules for the first mission. From my understanding, as you play further more missions into the game, you'll unlock more rules, more cards and components. So I won't be able to speak to all of those, but I will go over what's in the rule book, which pertains to the first mission and the basics of how to play the game. So let's get started with setup. So the first thing you'll look at is this guide deck. You'll see it says stop, do not shuffle, look at or reorganize these cards until instructed. So this is the deck that will kind of walk you through advancing through the missions and introduce new cards and rules as you go along. There are also a couple of envelopes that seem to contain components of some sort. Again, they say do not open till instructed, and in the first mission, you're not instructed to open these, so I don't know what's in these, but I'm sure at some point, either in this guide deck or in the mission instructions, you'll be instructed to open these. But you'll see here when it says when setting your first game up, flip this card over and follow the instructions. So we flip it over. It says begin your first game. For your first game, play Mission 1. This serves as a good tutorial to learn the basic rules. Follow the setup instructions on pages 2 to 3 of the rule book. And then this down here just talks about if you're playing solo or with more than 2 players, because the first mission is set up for 2 characters. You can play with more characters in what they're calling here the sandbox mode. And you don't even have to use, if you play in the sandbox mode, you don't have to use the characters specified for the mission, and I'll show you where that is shortly. So basically, if you're playing the sandbox mode, you can use whatever character or however many characters you want if you're playing with more than 2 players. But we're just going to go with the basic rules as written in the rule book. So as it says here, we're going to play mission 1 and follow the setup instructions on page 2 to 3 of the rule book. So for mission 1, this is the mission book. You'll flip this open, you'll see this number up here, that's for mission 1. There's a little comic book graphic novel-ish, a little bit of a story here from the Mandalorian to read. Then you turn the page from that, and again, you see 1, which is mission 1. So it's got the map you're going to use and your objective, the characters you're going to use. So for here, you're going to use the Mandalorian and IG-11. You'll read the objective of the game for mission 1, which is to capture the asset. And how you go about doing that, and then this is how you fail the mission. If any character is defeated, then everybody loses the game. There may be, there are map rules here, and then there may be some setup instructions on this map. There are no, on this mission and map, there is no setup instructions, but future missions may have some setup instructions that you'll need to follow. Next, you'll take this deck of cards, which is the planning deck. You'll shuffle that and place it within reach of all players. Next, you'll take the event deck. You'll see it has different back. The event decks have different backs. The back kind of gives you a clue of what enemies might be affected by that event card, but you ignore them. You ignore the back when you're setting up your event deck. You just shuffle the event deck and then place it underneath this space of the map board. These are the damage tokens. They have 2-sided, so 1 damage or 2 damage on the other side, and these are 3 and 4 damage. So you just put those somewhere near the board and within reach of all players. These are the disrupt tokens. Some of them have like a yellow border. You'll want to find the 5 with the grayish border. You'll shuffle those up to randomize them. Oops. And then you'll place one on each of these action spaces. Oops, I'm doing a terrible job of randomizing these. Alright, you'll place one face up on each of these action spaces. If there are any remaining, which on the first mission there is some remaining, you'll just shuffle that back in with the remaining disrupt tokens. And in the first mission, I did not come across any point where more disrupt tokens were placed, but in future missions, I believe there are game effects that will end up putting more disrupt tokens onto action spaces. And we'll talk about what those do when they're on action spaces here in a little bit. Next, you'll find all the threat tokens that have the current mission number on there. So these all have the number 1 on them, so they're for this mission. You'll notice these threat tokens have different shapes, so you want to sort them into stacks by shape and then randomize them, which I've already done here. The ones with this pentagon shape you can just put off to the side of the map. They will be used later as reinforcements. Then you'll look on your map and you'll see icons that match the shape of the threat tokens. For instance, these with the triangle match the shape of these two. So on the map, you'll put a matching shaped threat token face down on the map in the spaces that have question marks. So for instance, we'll randomize these triangles and put them face down because these two triangle spaces have question marks. If it doesn't have a question mark, then you'll put one of the appropriate shape face up. So for instance, if we start here, we need one with a square face up. I've already randomized these, so we'll just flip this over. We'll see that's an enemy. Here we need a round one face down. So face down, a square face up. Here's a square face up, and so forth. I'll go ahead and seed the rest of the map with the threat tokens. Alright, so all my threat tokens were used, putting them on the map as designated by the icons on the map. Again, the face up ones are enemies. The face up down ones could be enemies, or they could be a feature, which is something other than an enemy. Like they could be, in mission 1 at least, they could be a med pack. They could be one of the door control features that you're looking for. When you find both of those, that will unlock. We'll talk more about what the map is, but this is a locked door, and you're looking for 2 door control features to unlock that door. And of course, one of them is also the asset that you're looking for your objective. You'll see it's a triangle threat, so you'll know one of these is the asset, the other one could be an enemy. So again, face down threat tokens could be enemies, or they could be features that are helpful. You just never know. Now the players select their characters. Again, this mission shows that you need the Mandalorian and IG-11. So those are the ones we're going to get. Each player will choose one of those characters. If you're playing, as I mentioned before, if you're playing with more than 2 characters, you can play in sandbox mode where other players can choose one of the other available characters. Or there's a shared character mode where the players, if you're playing with more than the number of the characters specified for the mission, where the players will share the characters and share their skill decks. You can read about that in the rules. I'm going to go ahead and just play like this mission as if I'm playing with 2 different players and using the characters specified. So we'll use the Mandalorian and IG-11. The rest of these I'll just put back in the box. When you take your character card, you'll notice it has a novice side and a standard side. The difference is they have less health. On this side you have 6 health, this side you have 8 health. The game suggests starting with the novice side, so that's what I'm going to do. You also take your matching standee and place it on the start space on the map. So this icon represents the start space. So there's the Mandalorian and here's IG-11. So both players will put their characters on the start space. Each player will take their deck of 12 skill cards, shuffle that and place that near their character card, and then draw 4 cards into their hand. Since I'm playing by myself here, I'm going to be making my hand visible here. Normally players would draw these cards in their hand and keep them secret from other players. And I just wanted to mention there is another difficulty. I'd mentioned if you're playing on Novice, you have your character card with the 8 health side that says Novice. If you're playing the standard game, you would keep it on this side that has less health. And you can even play the veteran difficulty level where you'll place your character card on the side with less health, and instead of drawing 4 cards into your hand, you'll only have a hand limit of 3 cards, so you'll only draw 3 cards into your hand. But as I mentioned, they suggest starting on the novice difficulty, so I'm going to do that, keeping my character cards on the novice side and a hand size of 4. And then you can give each player a reference card which has the steps of the game and some enemy abilities on the back. The final step is to choose a first player. The group decides amongst them who's going to be the first player. As usual, I'm just going to start with my player on my far left here to be my first player. And we've completed the setup instructions on page 2 to 3 of the rulebook as specified here. So then we can discard this card from the game. It won't be used anymore. Now we look and it says stop. After you complete your first mission, win or lose, flip this card and follow the instructions. So we won't be using this guide deck any further until we complete this first mission, and then we flip this card over, win or lose. So now we can begin with how to play Mission 1 of the Mandalorian Adventures. Alright, so how do we play? The game is played in a series of turns. Each turn player, starting with the first player, each turn player will have their action step in which they'll perform 2 actions. Then they'll have their event step, which may or may not resolve a crisis or an event. We'll talk about when we get there. And then a draw step where they'll refill their hand back up to 4 cards if you're playing the standard or novice difficulty level. And then it'll be the next player's turn, and you continue going like that, players taking turns until either you meet the objective of the mission or the failure criteria of the mission. So let's talk about what a player can do on their turn, starting with the action step. Alright, so in the action step, a player must perform 2 actions, and a player performs an action by playing a skill card to their hand to one of the action spaces on the bottom of the map here. So you've got move action, attack action, intel action, and plan action, at least on Mission 1. Now, as I said, I've only played Mission 1, so I don't know if there are additional actions. I believe that there could be additional actions on future maps, but I'm sure you'll always at least have these 4 actions. As I said, in the action step, a player will take 2 actions. They'll do an action by playing one of the cards from their hand to one of the actions, and then after they've resolved that action, they play another card, skill card from their hand, to a different action. You can't on your turn play 2 skill cards to the same action. So in other words, you can't take the same action twice by playing your skill cards during a turn. Now there can be some effects we'll talk about later that can allow you to do the same action more than once in a turn, but we'll talk about that when we get there. So a player's skill cards have a number up in the top left. They may have some other effects, but right now we'll just talk about the number in the top left. So that's the strength of the action you're going to perform. So let's talk about the move action. If a player played this card to the move action space, then they're going to move their character, and as you can see, you can move up to the number of spaces of the strength of the skill card that you played. So in this case, if the Mandalorian played this skill card to the move action, he could move up to 3 spaces. So then he would just take his standee and move, 1, 2, 3. However, now if you enter a space with an enemy, you must stop your movement. So even if he had more movement, in this case he only has 3s, because we only played a 3 strength card, so he would have to stop in that case anyway. But if he had played a 4 movement and he moved this way and moved into this enemy space, he would have to stop. He couldn't use his 4th point of movement. So if you enter a space with a face-up enemy token or a face-down threat token, then you must stop your movement. When you enter a space with a face-down threat token, you immediately flip it over and reveal it. And at that point, you'll see whether it's an enemy or a feature. But in any case, you'll have to stop your movement. Now, if a threat token is already revealed, for instance this one, if it was already revealed, now I've just placed this here, obviously there's not a space for a threat token here, but I just flipped it over to show it here. If you've already got a revealed threat token and it's a feature, like this is a med pack, then that will not stop your movement. You can move through it if you wish, and when you're moving through it or land on it, you can use that feature. For instance, if it's a med pack, you can use that feature to heal 1 health, in other words, remove 1 damage token from your character if you have it, or you can just leave it and keep passing through it. So again, a revealed feature token, one that's not an enemy, does not stop your movement. But if it hasn't been revealed yet, then when you move into that space, your movement stops, and then you reveal it. Let's look at some other spaces on the map. As I mentioned at the beginning of the setup, or part of the setup instructions, this icon here that's like a red door that shows this, that's a locked door. You cannot move through that or count range through that. And we'll talk about range later when we're talking about some of the other skills. But you can't move through a locked door or count range through a locked door. Now, later, if that door becomes unlocked by you revealing the 2 door control features that are one of these face-down circle tokens, circle threat tokens, when you reveal them, you'll place them on these spaces, and when you've got both of them, you'll unlock that door, and then that becomes a space that you can move through and can count range through. Spaces like these that have these red lines around them, those are forbidden spaces. You cannot move through or count range through those spaces. So you'll never be able to move into, move through, or count range through those spaces. Now, spaces like this that have a dotted line, you can count range through those. Those are called elevated spaces. You can count range through those. You cannot enter these spaces through the dotted line, but you'll see some of these have the regular thin white line where you can enter that space through that area. So for this elevated space, you could move into it from this area, and this one you could move into it from this area, but you could not move out. You cannot go across the dotted lines. But again, for some of the other actions we're going to talk about, you can count range through those spaces. And gray lines like this are a wall. You cannot, these thicker gray lines, you cannot pass through, move through those. You cannot count range through those. So those are similar to the forbidden spaces, although you can enter this building through the door once you've unlocked it. Alright, that covers pretty much all the spaces on the Mission 1 map. And that pretty much covers the move action. You play a skill card to the move action. The number is the strength of your skill card, is the number of spaces you can move. And then you just move your character that number of spaces. We've talked about the spaces you can't move through, and we've talked about if you move into an enemy space or a face-down threat token space, you have to stop your movement at that point. And if it's a face-down threat token, you reveal it. Alright, that's the move action. Let's talk about the attack action. So if you play one of your skill cards to the attack action, that of course allows you to attack one of the enemies on the board or on the map. Before we talk about the attack action, one more thing I want to say about movement and the spaces on the map. You can move through a space with another character, and there's no limit to the number of tokens or characters or enemies in a space. So you can have several enemies in a space and a character and a threat token. Of course, if a character is in a space with a threat token, that token will be revealed. But there's no limit to the number of characters or tokens, enemies, or threat tokens that can be in a space. So I just wanted to mention that. Back to the attack action. So when you play a card to the attack action, the strength of that skill card is the number of damage you'll deal to one enemy within range 1. And you can see that right here. Deal number of damage to a threat within range 1. So if you played a 3, you would deal 3 damage to a threat or an enemy within range 1. So for instance, range is the number of spaces away. Again, you can't count range through these forbidden spaces or a locked door or a wall. But this enemy is within range 1. So if the Mandalorian played this, he would deal 3 damage to this enemy. And this number here is the enemy's health. So if they ever take damage equal to or greater than that, then they're eliminated and just placed on the side of the board. So if this enemy took 3 damage, its health is only 1, it would be eliminated and just placed off to the side of the board. If the Mandalorian was in this space and he played this 3 attack, again it's against a threat within range 1, and I said through these dotted lines you can count range, so he could attack this enemy that's on this rooftop or whatever it is. With this attack, he would do 3 damage. His health is 4, so it wouldn't eliminate it. So if you do damage to an enemy that is not sufficient to eliminate it, you just put damage tokens on it equal to the damage done. So if you did 3 damage, you would just take one of these 3 damage tokens and put it on that enemy. If it ever takes an additional damage, then it would be eliminated. And you'll notice this says deal damage to a threat within range 1. So if you're in the space with an enemy, then it is range 0, but you can do the attack within range 1, so you could attack the enemy that's in the same space of you. So either 0 or 1. Also, you'll notice that it says you deal damage to a threat within range 1. So you could attack a threat token that you don't know that it's an enemy or not. So if you played this card to this attack action with a strength of 3, you could attack this threat token that you don't know what it is. After you've made the decision of the token that you're going to attack, you flip it over. If it's an enemy, then you go ahead and deal that amount of damage to it. If it's not an enemy, if it's a feature, then you just reveal it and it doesn't take any damage. It's now just a revealed feature. Alright, let's go on and talk about the intel action. If you played this 3 strength card to the intel action, you'll see that it says secretly look at a face-down threat within range of the number of the strength of the card that you played. So in this case, you could secretly look at a face-down threat within range 3. So you could look at this one. If you do, you pick it up, look at it. you're the only one that can see it. Now you can talk about it to other players. You just can't show it to other players. So you can tell the truth about what you saw, or you can lie about what you saw, but you can't show it to other players. Only you secretly look at it and put it back down. And again, it's within range of the strength of the card that you played. So if the Mandalorian was here, he would be able to look at this token because it's range 2 and he played a card with a strength of 3, so he can look at a token up to range 3 away. So he could look at this one or this one. If he was here, he could not look at these because you can't count range through a locked door or a wall. He could count 1, 2, 3. He could look at that one. You can count range through these dotted lines elevated, so he could look at this one because that's only 1, 2, and he could look at this one, 1, 2, 3. He could look at this one, it's 1, 2, and he could look at this one, it's 1, 2, 3. So if he was here and he played a 3 strength card on this intel, the only ones that he wouldn't be able to look at is the ones in this room here because they're behind a wall or a locked door. Now you can only look at one, and again you look at it and put it back face down. It doesn't become revealed at that point. But so you can look at a threat, face down threat within range of the strength of the card that you played, or you can move an enemy within range of the strength of the card that you played, and you move it 1 space. So if the Mandalorian was here and he wanted to use this to move an enemy instead of look at a face down threat, he could, since it's a strength of 3, he could move this enemy, over here if he wanted to. He can move this enemy over here if he wanted to, since normally you can't cross, as I said, these dotted lines, but that is a white line there, so he could move that enemy over there. He could move that enemy back there. He could move this enemy back here. 1, 2, 3. This one's in range 3, so he could move this enemy here, or he can move this enemy here. So anyway, you can move an enemy 1 space as long as they're within range of the strength of the card that you played. So one of those two, either secretly look at a face down threat or move an enemy. And the reason you might want to move an enemy is if there's an area you're wanting to move to. You'll notice some of these enemies have icons on them, like this one has this, which is sentry. So like these enemies both have these icons, which is a sentry ability. And that ability is if you end your movement within 1 space of that enemy with a sentry ability, you take 1 damage. And you have to end your movement within range 1 of such an enemy. So if you were going to move 3, like if the Mandalorian was doing a move of 3, he could move 1, 2, 3 and pass within range 1 of that enemy. But since he didn't end his movement within range 1 of that enemy, he would not have to take a damage. Now if he ended his movement here, because he's within range 1, you can count range through these elevated lines, then he would have to take a damage. If you start your movement adjacent to an enemy with sentry, you don't take any damage. It's only when you end your movement within range 1 of a enemy with sentry ability that you take 1 damage. Alright, that covers the intel action. And finally, if you play one of your skill cards to the plan action, you'll see you'll draw the number of planning cards equal to the strength of the cards you play there. You get to keep 1 of them, and then if you drew here, we played a 3, you would draw 3 cards from the planning deck. Remember, that's this one. You can keep 1 and place it underneath your character card. If you drew more than 1, you can place 1 back on top of the deck if you wish, and any others you'll just discard next to the planning deck. And let's just look at what some of these planning cards are. So if we played this card, 3 strength, we would get to draw 3 planning cards. And we'll just look at these 3. So this one, retaliate. After an enemy deals you damage, even if you block it, you discard this to deal 2 damage to that enemy. Or I happen to draw 2 defends here. But if you have a defend, when you are dealt damage, discard this to block 1 damage. So anyway, when you do the plan, you draw a number of planning cards equal to the strength of the cards you played there. You can keep one. So if you decided to keep this one, you go ahead and place it under your character card. Then you can, if you have enough, you can put one back on top of the planning deck, and the other you just discard to the side. Or you could just decide to discard both of those if you wanted to. Of course, if you only draw one, then you only have the option of keeping that one. You can, if you had, for instance, if you had taken this defend and you hadn't used it, and then on a future turn you did plan again and you drew another defend, you can't have 2 of the same planning cards at the same time. So you wouldn't be able to keep this defend if you already had one. If one of the planning cards you draw is a bad luck, no effect, you can't keep that. You have to discard that. I mean, there'd be no reason you'd want to keep that. It's no benefit to you, but the rules state you can't keep it, so I just thought I'd mention that you would have to discard that one. But that pretty much covers the plan action. There are different cards that we didn't see in these examples, and maybe we'll see some of those in our example turns. Alright, let's look at some other icons on these skill cards. So some skill cards will have a bonus icon on them. When you use that skill card to take an action, you can play it to any of the action locations, but if you play it to the action location that matches the icon, so for instance this one, it's got the icon that matches plan. If you play it to the plan action, it gives you a bonus strength. So if you played this card to the plan action, the strength of this card would be 4, whereas if you played it to any of the other action, it would just be the printed number of 3. That we haven't talked about the event step yet, but this does not add to the total strength here when we get to the event step and we're totaling the strength in each one of these action locations. So it only gives you a bonus to the strength of your card when taking that action. And you'll understand what I'm talking about when we get to the event step, when I'm saying that doesn't count towards the total strength when you're doing the event step. But anyway, that's the bonus icon. Some skill cards like this one have a skill ability, and similar to the bonus icon, it'll have the icon that matches one of the action locations. If you play that card, you can play that card to any of the action locations for that strength, but if you play this card to the action location that matches the icon and the text there, so if you played this one to the attack, you would get to do a regular attack at strength 2, just like normal, but then you also have the option to use the ability down here. In this case, it's deal 2 damage to an enemy in your space in addition to performing this action. Now, some might say in place of doing the normal action, you can do the skill ability. It just depends, but if it doesn't say in place, you can do the normal action and then also do this ability. Now, these ability, you can do it either before you resolve the action or after you resolve the action, unless it states that you have to do it either before or after. You can't do the skill ability in the middle of performing an action. For instance, if it was one that was in the move slot and it gave you an ability, you couldn't interrupt your movement to do the ability. You have to do it before or after you've done the action where you played that card, unless it specifies when it can be played on the card. Alright, so that's skill abilities. And I may have mentioned, but those are optional. You don't have to do them, though if you do decide to do them, you have to do them to the full extent of what is allowed. I should also mention you can play a card to an action location and not perform the action, but the strength of the card will still count toward the strength total when you're doing the event step. And again, that'll make sense here when I get to talking about the event step. A few more things I want to talk about in the actions real quick. Some abilities like this strategize planning card, if you had this, allow you to take an additional action. So this one says during your turn you can discard this to draw two skill cards and or perform one additional action this turn. So if you're performing an additional action, you still have to play one of the cards from your hand, and you still cannot play it to one of the locations that you've already taken an action at. So if you had taken an action here and an action here, and then you decide to use your strategy card to draw two more skill cards into your hand and then perform an additional action, you couldn't do the move action or the intel action because you've already done them this turn. You would have to do the attack or the plan action with one of the cards still in your hand. So that's an additional action. Now if some ability comes up that says gives you a free action, that a free action does not you don't have to use one of your cards from your hand. You can just choose one of the actions, and it can be an action you've already done, and it does not count towards the two actions you'll normally take in your turn. So for instance, you had an ability that said you can take a free 3 strength action. Then you can take any of the actions for a strength of 3. Doesn't cost you a card, doesn't count towards your 2 actions you take for your turn, and it doesn't prevent you from taking that action again as long as you haven't already taken it with one of your other cards. So basically it's a free action, which is different than an additional action. Alright, that covers all the actions. Now we'll move on to the event step, because after you've taken your 2 actions, then you'll move on to the event step. So when you get to the event step, you'll check each action location or action slot and total the strength there. So for instance, if the Mandalorian had gone and he took these 2 actions, the attack action and the plan action, then it comes to his event step. Well, first he'll resolve the move action slot, and the total strength there is just 1, so nothing will happen. Then he moves on to the attack action slot. Well, he's got a total strength of 6. If your total strength is 6 or more, you have to resolve a crisis, which for this mission is right here. You'll place 1 damage token here, so you'll take a damage token and put it here. Then when 3 tokens are here, remove them and spawn 1 reinforcement in one of the star spaces with the fewest enemies. So remember, on this map we've got 2 star spaces here. So if you ended up putting a 3rd damage token here, then you would flip over one of these reinforcement enemy tokens and place it on the star space with the fewest enemies. So if your total is 6 or more, you resolve the crisis. Then if your total was 5 or more, which in this case it would be because the total is 6, you would have done the crisis. Then you have to take the top event card, flip it over, and resolve that. Now it may have a text ability, in which case you just do whatever it says. This one says the nearest enemy moves 1 space towards you. Then if it is in your space, it attacks. But you may also get an event card like this. So this event card says 2 blaster class enemies will move 1 space. So on the enemy tokens, you'll see this one is like a melee class. This one is a blaster class. and these are sharpshooter class. So when you are resolving an event card, you resolve it from top to bottom. This one again says move 2 blaster class enemies 1 space. So the player who's resolving the event will choose 2 blaster class enemies. There are several of them on the board right here, 3 I guess. So he would choose 2 of them, since it specifies 2, and move them 1 space. Now they always move 1 space toward the nearest character. So if the Mandalorian was here and maybe IG-11 was here, and IG-11, we'll say IG-11 was resolving this card, he would have to choose 2 blaster class enemies to move 1 space. So he could choose, if he chose this one, it would move. He would have to move it toward the nearest enemy, or the nearest character along the shortest path. So he couldn't choose to move this one here. He would have to move it into his space, and then he would have to choose 1 more to move. So he probably wouldn't want to choose this one because that would move into his space as well. So maybe he would choose this one and move it into the space with the Mandalorian there. Alright, so again it'll show a class of enemy, how many, and the number of spaces. This says 1, so they move 1 space. Then 2 blaster class enemies will attack at range, with a range of 2. So then the person resolving this card has to choose 2 enemies and have them attack characters that are within range 2 if possible. In this case, we do have, this if you chose this one, this guy's in range 1, so he could attack him, or of course both these that are in the same space are at range 0, so they could attack. So it's up to range 2, it doesn't have to be at range 2. When a character is attacked, the character just takes 1 damage token. So if IG-11 decided, okay, well, I have this blaster class enemy attack me, and this blaster class enemy attack you. So both characters would take a damage token and place it on their character card. If you ever have damage equal to your health, then your character is defeated, and in this case you lose the message if the mission if a character is defeated. Then you just discard this event card, like you could have a discard pile for event cards here. But you'll have noticed this was on the back of the card, so you would know the next event card to be resolved is likely to involve blaster class enemies. Alright. So you would resolve that event card. Now there's other events. There's one with the text, one that'll move and have enemies attack. You might get one like this. This has this icon that means spawn an enemy, so you'd spawn an enemy in your space. When you spawn an enemy, you take one from the reserves, flip it, and put it wherever it says. In this case, it's in your space. And then you would have 1 blaster class enemy attack at up to range 2. And the player resolving the event makes decisions in case there's a tie. For example, this one says have 1 blaster class enemy attack at up to range 2. In this case, if Mandalorian is range 2 from this blaster class enemy, and IG-11 is range 2 from this blaster class enemy, then the player resolving that, which in this case we're saying is the IG-11 player, would decide which blaster class enemy attacks who. So maybe he would choose this one to attack Mandalorian, but maybe not. Maybe Mandalorian has 5 damage already, and IG-11 only has 2, so maybe he has it at this one attack him, or this one could attack him as well. Anyway, if there's a tie for a situation, the player resolving the event makes the decision on that. I should mention, if you're ever required to spawn a reinforcement and your reinforcement pile is empty, then you would flip over all defeated reinforcement tokens, shuffle them, and then use that as a new reinforcement pile. Or if, in the rare circumstance, maybe all the reinforcements are on the board, there's none to draw from, none already defeated and discarded, and you needed to spawn a reinforcement, you just wouldn't spawn one in that case. And if an event card, if you have to resolve an event card, you flip it over and it can't be resolved. For instance, if it, for example, if it said move blaster class enemies and attack with blaster class enemies, and you had no blaster class enemies on the board, so the event card, no part of the event card can actually be resolved, then instead of doing anything with that event card, you'll spawn a reinforcement into the nearest star space to the character resolving that event. Alright, so after you've, we were resolving this space, and we had a total of 6 strength, so we had to do a crisis and we had to resolve an event card because we had a strength of 5 or more. After you've resolved that event card, then any cards, skill cards that were there, go back to their player and just go into that player's discard pile, and any disrupt token that was there is just discarded. Then you go on to the next. So in this case we've only got a total of 2 strength, so nothing to resolve. This one we have a total of 5 strength, so we would not resolve the crisis, but we would have to draw and resolve an event. As I mentioned, if you end up having to resolve an event, then all cards and disrupt tokens in that action space will be discarded, back to the players that they belong to. The disrupt token will just be discarded to a discard pile. But, for example, if these were the 2 action cards that were played by the Mandalorian player, and you get to the event step, and you resolve, when you go to resolve this action slot, well, the total is only 3, so it's not 5 or more, so you won't resolve an event. It's not 6 or more, so you won't resolve a crisis. So if you don't resolve an event in that location slot, then the card, and if there's a disrupt token there, they both stay there. So that card would just remain there. So then on IG-11's turn, if he wanted to take an action here in the move space, he would just place his card below it, like so, and then take his action as normal. But then when he gets to his event step, the total strength in this slot will now include both these cards here, so it'd be 4, 5. So then you would have to resolve an event, and then after resolving that event, this token would be discarded, and these cards would go back to the respective players' discard piles. Once these disrupt tokens are removed in Mission 1 because you've resolved an event, in Mission 1 I did not find an ability that placed disrupt tokens back, but I think in future missions there are abilities that will, enemy abilities I believe, that will disrupt and cause you to place disrupt tokens back onto these action slots. Again, I haven't seen that yet, but just from some of the reading I've done. In the section in the rules where it talks about disrupt tokens, it mentions if an effect disrupts an action, then you'll randomly take one of the disrupt tokens and place it on that action slot of the action that was disrupted. So again, I didn't see that in Mission 1, but I'm sure that happens in future missions. Alright, I think we've covered the event step, and finally you get to the draw step, where you'll draw back up to 4 cards in your hand if you're playing the novice or standard game. If you're playing the veteran, then you would draw back just to 3 cards. If your hand already has 4 cards into it, then of course you wouldn't draw at all. But I think that pretty much covers a player's turn. Then The next player will then take their turn, again taking 2 actions, then having an event step, resolving each of the action slots, then going to their draw step while they draw their cards. If ever a deck runs out, event deck, planning deck, your skill card deck, you just shuffle that deck and then form a new deck from that. So that pretty much covers it. So you'll just keep taking turns. Again, the goal of this mission is to get a character. First, you need to find the 2 door control features, which would be one of these threat tokens with the round. Each one will be one of those. When you find it, you put it on here. Once you've got both, this door is unlocked. Then you need to get a character in here, and one of these triangle tokens will be the asset. It'll be the token that looks like that. So if you have a character in the space with the asset, at the end of any player's turn, then you complete this mission. And then of course you'd come back here, and after you complete your first game, win or lose, flip this card and follow the instructions. And I did play this mission and completed it. So I did flip this, and it looks like what happens right after that is you'll get more cards to add into the players' decks, and there's a few new rules that are added in. And then I did not yet look what the next mission is, but that covers pretty much how to play the game. I think we'll move on and do a few example turns, and then we'll wrap this up. Alright, I think I've got all the tokens back where they were right after setup. Everybody's got their hand of 4 cards. We decided the Mandalorian player would be our first player. And so he's going to go first. He's got to take 2 actions in his action step. So we'll have him play this skill card to the move. Has a strength of 3, so he can move up to 3 spaces. And so we'll have him just move. He doesn't have to move 3, he can move up to 3. So we'll have him move 1, 2 to right here. Alright, then now he's got to do one more action. You remember you have to take 2 actions. Actually, we'll go ahead and have him move the full 3 spaces. So he'll move into the same space here. Now, of course, he has to stop, but he was out of movement space, or out of movement anyway, so he would have to stop there. So now we'll do an attack action. So he's going to play this attack, which has a 2 strength, so he can deal that much damage to a threat within range 1. Well, this one's within range 1 since it's at range 0, so he's going to do 2 damage to that enemy. It has a health of 3, so that won't eliminate it, but now because he played this card to the location that matches the icon here, the attack, then he can do this ability as well. Deal 2 damage to an enemy in your space, in addition to performing that. So now he's going to do an additional 2 damage to this enemy in his space, which is going to be 4 damage, so this enemy will in fact be eliminated, and we'll just set it over here. Alright, so he's completed his 2 actions. Now we have to go on to the event step, where we'll check each slot for their total. This is only a total of 4, so we won't do anything there. Remember, it has to be 5 or more before you have to do anything. Here we do have a total of 5, 3 from this disrupt token and 2 from here, so we will have to resolve an event. So we'll draw our top event card. We're gonna it's ambush. We'll have to spawn a token at the nearest star spot, so we'll spawn a reserve. I would say the nearest is this one, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, this one down here is more. So here's the one we spawned, and it just goes in that spot. And then we have to have 1 sharpshooter do an attack at up to range 3. So let's look at our sharpshooters. We've got one here. If he goes 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, he can't reach anybody. This sharpshooter can do, you can count range through these dotted lines, so he can 1, 2, 3 attack that guy. This sharpshooter down here doesn't have anybody within range 3, so this is the one that he'll have to select to do an attack, and he'll have to unfortunately attack himself. Again, he is within range 3. 1, 2, 3. So the Mandalorian will have to take 1 damage. So we'll take 1 damage and put it on his character card. And now, because we resolved an event in this slot, we will put this card in his discard pile. That's the one he played to that space. And this token will get discarded. And then we do resolve the other action slots. That one's only got a strength of 2, strength of 2. So no other event cards have to be played. Oh, and we have to put this event card in a discard pile. So we'll just make our event discard pile there. And now he goes to his draw step. So he's got 2 cards in his hand. So he needs to draw 2 more from his skill deck into his hand. And that's going to end the Mandalorian's turn. Now we move on to IG-11's turn. So here's IG-11's hand of cards. We'll say he's going to play this 2 strength card to the plan. So he'll get to draw 2 planning cards. So he'll draw 2. He gets to keep 1. So I think he's going to keep this defend. He'll just put that under his character card. Now this one he can either discard or put it back. He can put 1 back on top of the deck. Since that's a strategize that gives an extra action, he thinks he's going to just put that back on top of the deck. So he doesn't have 1 to discard. Alright, that's his first action. He still has another action he has to do. And so I think he's going to take this one and he's going to play it to the move space. Now it does have a bonus icon but for attack, so because he's not playing it in an attack action slot, he doesn't get the bonus, so it just has a strength of 3. So now he can move 3. So he will move 1, 2, 3. He'll move in this spot where this enemy is. Then he would have to stop there even if he had additional movement, because he moved into a spot with an enemy. So, alright, he'll end his movement there. And that's he's now taken both of his actions, so that's all he can do. So now he has to move on to the event step. Alright, well we start with the move action slot, where we have a total of 7 actually here now, 7 strength. So, because we're over 6, we have to resolve a crisis, so we place 1 damage token there. There's not 3 there, so we don't have to spawn an enemy. Now, we do have to resolve an event, so he draws an event card, and what do we have here? Surgical Strike. So it's 2 sharpshooters will make an attack at range 3, and then after an enemy attacks, move it 1 space away from the nearest player. So when an effect has an enemy move further away, move 1 space away from the nearest player, it has to be able to move so that it is further away. If it can't move to where it's further away, then it just won't move. So anyway, we've got to do 2 sharpshooters attack at range 3. So we've got 1 here. He can't. 1, 2, 3. He can't reach Mandalorian, but this one we know can. And then we have another sharpshooter down here, which 1, 2, 3. He can't. Remember, we can't count range through this forbidden space, but we can count range through this one. So 1, 2, 3. So I think that's what he's going to do. He's going to have this sharpshooter shoot Mandalorian. So 1, 2, 3. So Mandalorian will have to take another damage. So we'll just flip that to 2. And then it needs to move 1 space away from the nearest player. Well, the nearest player is the Mandalorian, but it can only move here, which would not move it further away, because right now it's 1, 2, 3 counting range. If you move it here, it's still going to be 3 counting range. It can't move across one of the dotted lines to get further away. So if it can't move further away, it won't move. So this one won't move. Alright, and then this one will shoot 1, 2, 3 at IG-11. So IG-11 will have to take a damage token, but he's going to use his defend that he had when you were dealt damage, this discard to block it. So he's just going to discard this to block that damage. And now this sharpshooter must move one space further away. So he's going to move back here. Right, and that is going to cause this to be discarded. Now these cards will be taken away, and this token as well. These cards will go back to the discard players of the players that played them. We resolve this slot now. There's nothing there. This one only a strength of 2. This one only a strength of 4, so no more event cards to be played. So that is going to end the event step for IG-11. And now we'll go on to his draw step. So he's got 2 cards. He'll draw 2 more cards into his hand. And now we go back to the Mandalorian's turn. So I'll go through one more set of both players and then we'll wrap it up. Alright, we'll say the Mandalorian is going to plan. So he's going to play this card, and it has the bonus for the plan. So it has a strength of 4. So he will get to draw 4 cards from the planning deck. Choose one to keep. He'll keep one of these retaliates. Choose one to put back on top of the deck. He'll put the strategize back, and then these 2 will just get discarded. Alright, remember that was strength 4 because he had the 3 plus the 1 for the bonus since he did it in the same as the plan. And now let's have him do, he's going to move 1. It does have a bonus icon, but because he's not doing it in the attack action slot, he doesn't get the bonus. But he's going to move 1 into this space. Now because he's in this space, we flip this token and up. Unfortunately, it's an enemy. Maybe he should have done an intel. But that's going to be both his actions. So now we move on to the event step. This slot only has a strength of 1, so nothing to resolve. This one has nothing. This one only has a strength of 2. But we do have now a strength of 7 here. So we will have to resolve the crisis because it's greater than 6. So we'll put another damage token there. We will have to resolve an event. So we'll flip that. We know it's probably got something to do with melee enemies, so we flip this one. All melee enemies will move 3 spaces toward the nearest character. Well, this melee enemy is in a space, so he won't move. This melee enemy is in a space with a character, so he won't move. And this one will. The nearest one is going to be IG-11 here, so he's going to move 3 spaces. Now he's got to come out. He can't go across these dotted lines, so he's going to come out 1, 2, 3 to move 3 spaces toward the nearest character. Alright, and then one melee enemy will attack at range 0. Melee attacks are usually almost always at range 0. So now IG-11 has to choose one of the melee enemies to attack. He knows Mandalorian already has some damage, so he's going to have this one attack him. So he will have to take 1 damage, so he'll get a damage token and place that on his character. And now this card will be discarded, and actually that was Mandalorian's turn, so he's the one that decide which one's attack, which one is going to attack who. But anyway, he still would have done the same thing and had that melee one attack IG-11 because he's already got 2 damage. But now these cards and this token will be discarded, so this one will go into his discard pile. This one will go into IG-11's discard pile. And now it's his draw step, so he will draw 2 cards into his hand. So now we'll come to IG-11. Let's have IG-11 do an intel. So he can secretly look at a face-down threat within range 3 or he can choose to move an enemy within range 3 and move it 1 space. He wants to look at this token. It's within range 3. It's only range 1, so he'll take it and look at it, and oh, it's one of the door control features, so he knows he wants to move there and reveal that. And it just so happens that because he played this card into the intel spot, he gets to do this ability, which is deal yourself 1 damage to perform a free 3 strength action of your choice. So he gets to do a free action, which we talked about doesn't cost you a card, and you can do it in a place you've already taken an action or not. So he's going to do a move. It's a No, he's going to do an attack, free 3 strength attack. He'll attack this enemy that's in his space, which will eliminate it because it's only 2 strength. So we'll just put that over here. So that's his free action. He still has 1 more action he can take. So he'll play this card with 1 strength to the move. He doesn't get the ability because that's if he had used it in the plan space. But he does get to move 1. And he will move here, which will reveal this token, and then he can take that and place it in the space here. So they just need to find 1 more of those to unlock the door. And now he's taken both of his actions. So he moves on to his event step. We check this slot. There's only strength of 2, so nothing to resolve. This slot, there's a strength of nothing. This one, there is a strength of 5, so we will have to resolve an event. So we take the top event card, flip it over. Let's see what it is. Flip the nearest face-down threat face up, not through locked doors. So the nearest face-down threat to the player who's resolving this, which is going to be, and it's not through the locked door, so it's going to be one of these up here. So this one is 1, 2, 3, 4. This one is 1, 2, 3, because you can count range through these. So this is going to be the one that he's going to flip over. And there's a med pack. So if somebody gets that, they heal 1 health. That's all there is with that. So we discard it, but now we've resolved, since we resolved an event here, we discard this token, discard this card to his discard pile, and nothing to resolve in the plan. So now we go to the draw step. He's got 2 cards, so he'll draw 2 more cards into his hand. And now we would go back, and it would be the Mandalorian's turn. So you can see how the game plays. They want to find the other, door control token, which will unlock the door, and then they want to get in here and find which one of these tokens is the asset. And if they do so and end their turn there before one of them is eliminated, they complete this mission successfully. Either way, you go ahead and resolve this card and go on and see what happens. But I'm going to wrap it up. I think you can understand the basics of how this game plays. Of course, new rules and new cards are added as you complete missions, and so they're kind of in that way they're slowly adding new rules. So you can start out with basic rules and then slowly add more to learn the game as it goes on. So that's it. Again, I've only played the 1 mission. I enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to moving on to the next mission. I'm going to wrap this up. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it.